There's something I find hard to understand. Just like we in India want to and are attempting to isolate Pakistan, being the state sponsor of terrorism, and expect the other nations to understand our predicament vis a vis Pakistan and engage with them accordingly, Israel too is the victim of terrorism at the hands of Iran sponsored proxies and expects other countries, including India, to deal with Iran in an appropriate way. After considering our zero tolerance towards terrorism, terrorism and talks can't go hand in hand. Why do we treat Iran like a normal nation and wish to streamline our relationship with it? I understand we have our interest in circumventing Pakistan to get access to Afghanistan and Central Asia, but being the state sponsors of terrorism, why don't we treat the same way Iran the same way as we treat Pakistan? When we expect others to have zero tolerance towards terrorism, why do we support a nation that unleashes terror on others? Okay, so the assumption behind this question is that Iran is a genuine state sponsor of terrorism, right? So Iran is our neighboring country. Well, not right now, temporarily not, but yes, historically our neighboring nation. Now, let's talk about terrorism. What is terrorism? Terrorism is what India has experienced for several decades. Pakistan unleashed terrorism on India. And let's remember who financed and funded the terrorism. It was the United States for several decades. We know what happened in Kashmir, the exodus of the Kashmiri native Hindus who are still living like as refugees in other parts of India. So that also happened through US sponsored Pakistani terrorism. So we know what Pakistani terrorism is like. We know what terrorism is like. Now, when somebody makes the claim that Iran is a state sponsor of terrorism, please, I would like to know where where are those Iranian suicide bombers? Where are those Iranian terrorists? We know what Pakistani terrorists look like. We have seen so many of them. They end up flat on their faces on the streets with traumatic damage on their body when they eventually meet the Indian armed forces. We know what terrorism looks like. We know what Pakistani terrorists look like. We know what ISIS terrorists look like. We know what Al Qaeda terrorists look like. Where are those Iranian terrorists? And where are they doing those suicide bombings and whatever else? And in which nation are they doing it? The problem is that the entire media is controlled by the West, and that's why they can label any nation a state sponsor of this or that. Okay, so Iran is just like any self-respecting nation that has ambitions, geopolitical ambitions, seeks to expand its power projection abilities, which means that it leverages the assets that it has developed in Iraq. Doesn't mean that these are terrorist attacks or terrorist assets. It has assets and it has a good relationship with the nation of Syria. It has a good relationship with Russia, with Yemen, and so on. And when Iran plays the game of geopolitical power projection, the Americans will label that as having terrorist proxies. When the Americans use ISIS against the nation of Syria, those are what do they call them? Moderate rebels. When the US employs Al Qaeda to fight the Syrian government and unleash hell on the people, on the Yazidis and whatnot, including ISIS, those are moderate rebels. When the whole nation of Iraq is devastated, more than 1 million people die under the bombs, well, that is liberation. It's democracy. We have to understand what terrorism really is, and is Iran really a terrorist nation? And then we have to understand that every nation has its own interests, and the one job of the leader and the government of a nation is to further your nation's national interests. That is all it is. And this is something we were taught by our, well, not sure he was everyone's ancestor, but Mr. Chanakya, Vishnugupta Chanakya. He taught us this, and it is part of our heritage. So we should remember that. The world is not a very nice place. The world is a harsh place. It's a cutthroat world. Every nation looks out for itself. Think of the global geopolitical scene as a big fish tank in which you have thousands of fish, different kinds of fish. Some fish will join together and work together. Other fish will be too large and they will try to eat them and so on. So it's constant cooperation and competition. It's simply the law of the jungle. That's how geopolitics works. Okay? And every nation, whoever is the leader, has only one job. You serve your nation and your people. So when it comes to the leader of India, his job is to serve the people of India and the nation of India, and that's all. And sometimes you may have to, let me give you an example. How many of you remember that a few years ago, the daughter of the Sultan of Dubai, the Emir of Dubai, whatever his name is, The daughter, her name was not. Okay, I forget the name of the lady. She escaped from Dubai by a via boat or yacht or something, and she wanted to take refuge in India. Okay, and she was her ship was of her yacht was off the coast of Goa. So the Sultan of Dubai calls up Mr. Modi, says that I am facing this problem. My daughter has run away, and it's a terrible embarrassment to me and my family. Can you please do something about it? Okay, and this lady, the princess, she apparently, it seems that her father was very cruel to her, and she wanted to escape, and she thought that India will give her shelter. And what Mr. Modi did was that he asked the Indian Coast Guard to intercept this vessel, take the lady into custody, and repatriate her back to her father. Okay, so that's what Mr. Modi did. Now it is entirely possible, I don't know, that maybe she was right, and maybe she wanted to flee from her nation and get refuge elsewhere. But when it comes to the national interest, we want to have good relations with our friends in the UAE, and when such a request comes in, you accede to the request. I'm sure it's sad for that lady. I sometimes I would say it's sad for her. I feel so sorry for her. But what Mr. Modi did was in his own nation's interest, and that was obviously a considerable fillip to the relationship between India and the UAE and Dubai. And in a week or two later, the Dubai extradited a known terrorist back to India. Okay, so that's how it works. So you have to put your nation's interest first. I do not believe that Iran is a state sponsor of terrorism as the West claims, and Iran has done absolutely nothing to hurt India's national interests. It's actually the US that is hurting India's national interest by prohibiting India from buying Iranian gas and oil. I mean, Iran is right next door. Imagine how much cheaper it will be to get oil just from Iran. But no, we can't do it because of the US sanctions and US threats and arm twisting. So I don't see Iran as a state sponsor of terrorism. Iran is not a terrorist nation in any way compared to the way Pakistan is. And India has to look out for its own interests. People will say that why is India cooperative with the Taliban? The Taliban are so harsh on their women. It's not my problem. Okay, and it's not the problem of the Indian leadership and the Indian government. What happens in Afghanistan inside there is their own business. It's none of our business. If their people have a problem with the Taliban and the way it is governing the nation, they can take it up with the Taliban leadership. If the ladies and the girls of Afghanistan are unhappy, they should go and talk to the leaders of the country. But we, as a nation, sovereign nation, will deal with Afghanistan as another sovereign nation in a mutually beneficial manner. And same goes with Iran. So we have to understand that we have to be realistic and pragmatic in international relations. There is no place for morality and ethics. The only morality of a king is that his kingdom and its people should prosper. So yeah, that's how it is. Iran, from our perspective, is a normal nation. It is a nation with which we want to have good relations, and I do not see Iran as a state sponsor of terrorism, despite whatever the Western media claims and various Western nations claim.